Hello, I'm Brigantia Blackbird of Blackbird's Brew. Happy Saturday and welcome to this week's Loki video. So the world of fiction has taken great notice of old mythologies, and lately I've been seeking out novels that make an attempt to retell the old stories. Sometimes they have a different spin to the stories. Sometimes they seem to be an attempt to try and fill in the details to figure out how exactly the gods got from point A to point B in mythology and why they arrived there. And it's been interesting to read how a variety of authors have really wrestled with all of this, especially in the case of Loki. So the book Loki by Mike Vasich took the myths, didn't water them down, and the end result of the book was incredibly heart-wrenching. In the beginning of it, it was all very focused on Loki, what he was up to, and the portrayal of Loki in this context was very nuanced and very complex. I felt like the writer rather, just got him, more or less. Loki was shown to be an Odin loyalist, despite the fact that Odin in this book was not speaking up for him and definitely not acknowledging when Loki was taking questionable actions, it was at Odin's behest. So Loki's murky reputation was in part the consequence of Odin not being open with the rest of the Aesir about what was going on and why. Apparently the rest of the Aesir weren't really aware of Loki's bloodline, which I don't really see why him being of half-giant descent would have been all that big a deal, considering how many of the gods themselves had giant blood in them, but, never mind. But he was always in this state of vulnerability of, Odin could reveal him at any moment. The other gods, because they were unaware, could cause even more problems. And there was something about it just from the get-go that was off-putting. Further into the book, the focus went completely off of Loki, which I found disappointing. I mean, the book is titled Loki, therefore it doesn't seem to be too much of a stretch to suppose that Loki is the main character and that we'll be seeing things through his eyes. But about halfway through, Loki began only popping up into the story every now and then, and all the complexity and the nuance of him was lost, and Loki became very one-dimensional and reactionary, just essentially taking him at face value. Which I mean, I don't like that as a Loki follower, and I don't like that just as a reader. Don't tell me a story's about one person and say, oh no, actually they're a side character after all. Just it doesn't work for me. Because in the end, the book was actually more about Odin and how everything that took place was in consequence of Odin finding out the Ragnarok was coming. And Odin didn't just think that this was unavoidable or the natural logical consequence of events. He believed in it. He believed in it this really visceral, twisted way. So much so that Odin began actively facilitating the process to make sure that it was going to happen. And I mean, and it's one thing to know that something is going to happen or to even know that it's inevitable. One example of that would be, the natural aging process. We all understand we'll get older and there'll be physical ramifications to that process. And at some unknown point, our bodies will wear out and we'll die. That's one thing. But there are things we can do. We can all make an effort to try to eat healthier, try to be more active, or to do various things, to take care of our mental health as well, so that however long we're alive, we have a good quality of life. That's one approach. Another approach is just kind of basically go through life and, accepting this natural process will take place and accepting it, not doing anything to really forestall or make it worse. But just imagine just imagine deliberately and intentionally hurrying up the aging process, doing things to yourself, not because you enjoyed them, and like, oh, well, this is a naughty habit or something maybe I shouldn't really be doing, but it's fun and I enjoy it, therefore I'm going to do it anyway. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about something that is doing something that is destructive because it is destructive and because it will, weaken your body, make you look older, make you feel older, make you fall apart all that much sooner. That's essentially what was going on. And that's really how I reacted to how Odin's actions were portrayed in this book. He wasn't trying to avoid Ragnarok. He wasn't trying to improve the odds of the gods of the world. He wasn't looking for alternative solutions. He wasn't looking for a way out or a way to make things good while everyone was still here. He went out of his way to make things worse, to ensure that it was coming, it would be as awful as possible, and everyone would suffer. He just didn't care. Ultimately, Odin viewed Loki as a tool. He was a means to an end, and it served Odin's purpose for the rest of the Aesir to take the worst possible view of Loki's character and actions. He kept all the gods in the dark. He didn't care about their well-being. He outright demonized Loki. He turned Loki into the enemy that he needed him to become in order to trigger all the events that would end in Ragnarok. Odin's knowledge of the future resulted in him devaluing everyone who was around him, and it showed in every single interaction. And I found this really heartbreaking in Loki's case. And it also reminded me of how I reacted to the recent Loki series on Disney when it was revealed to him that the TVA had essentially destined him to failure and frustration and pain. And whenever he deviated from that course, they lopped off that branch of the timeline and put him back on this very self-destructive path that's led in a futile and pointless death. And they told him that essentially his only purpose in being alive was to be a foil to everyone else, to give them a reason to bring out their best selves. It was about their triumph, their well-being, what they wanted, and the future that the TVA wanted. And that's essentially the same treatment that Loki got in this book. And when I read the ending, the survivors of Ragnarok came out of Yggdrasil. They were going to rebuild, and I didn't care. I was not attached to anyone who came through it. I actually thought, well, what exactly made you so special that you got to live through the end of all the worlds, and now you get to rebuild and live again? What's so good about you? Because I wasn't seeing a whole lot, and I didn't feel hopeful. I didn't feel hopeful that the rebirth of the world was in, the hands of those survivors. It wasn't life affirming, which is really weird because that's the kind of conclusion it was really supposed to be. So, was this book worth reading, despite of the objections I've expressed about it? I would say yes, because if for no other reason, the book was written in an absolutely fearless fashion. The author obviously is very well familiar with the myths and how everything fits together, so I can't fault him on that. And I think the way in which it's written is pretty decent. I think it's a very engaging story. But I don't know, just something was missing. Something was missing, and I think it's the heart. And not just the heart of Loki, I think it was the heart of all of the gods. They just came across as a bit more petty. And obviously, we understand that our gods don't represent some kind of impossible high moral standard the way the monotheistic religions claim about their god. We understand that they have their flaws, they have their foibles, they have their own course of evolution that they have to work through for themselves. But it just felt like the cores of their being weren't really there. We had their actions, but just, I don't know, they just seemed reduced, lessened. So that's essentially my take of it. If you've read the book and you'd care to discuss it, or you're interested in reading for yourself and then having a chat, by all means, come visit me at Blackbird's Brew. There's a link to join in the box below. In the meantime, please subscribe to this channel, like the video, leave a comment, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.